Good morning and welcome to Family Jewels. I'm Colton Bartell.
And I'm Audie Bartell.
And we are both graduate gemologists here at Suzanne's Custom Jewelers. And this week we are going to stray away from gemstones for a little bit.
Thought maybe we were going somewhere.
Yeah, well, we could, but I don't know where we'd go.
Yeah.
We tend to go down a lot of rabbit holes. So
I don't know if there's that many.
Just watch a couple episodes, you'll understand. So today we're actually going to talk about watches, basically the different types of movements, and more so the care that we see a lot of people completely disregarding. Probably some of the more common fixes that we do, stuff like that. So
Okay,
yeah.
I'm ready.
So probably the oldest type of movement out there is going to be mechanical movement. I guess the oldest would be like a sundial, but it doesn't really work on your wrist real well.
I'm gonna say we'll just talk about the wristwatch.
Yeah. So mechanical watches are watches that basically operate using gears, pinions, springs, and levers.
Mechanical energy.
Mechanical energy, yes. And so these are not ones that have batteries in them. A lot of people get those confused for some reason, but that's why we're doing this little episode here.
Yeah, it is. And I've been fooled once in a while. Somebody will bring in, say, an automatic or a manual wind mechanical movement, and they'll want a battery replaced. And normally what I do is I ask, when was the last time you had one put in it? And
whenever they say, well, I don't remember, or I never have.
Yeah, and that's probably when I should. Now I look. But I have gotten back there and
got it open.
Got the back taken off, and then I look in there and I go, oh, Jesus, and then I have a battery anyway.
So
it gets real crowded if I put one in there.
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't do a lot of good.
No.
So this is actually mechanical movement. As you can see, we've actually got a bunch of little gears and stuff in there. Now, the issue gets to be is there are some electric movements out there that have been made that still incorporate some of the gears, like this balance, which is this little kind of gold-colored wheel here. This is actually the balance and the escapement, which this is what basically regulates the power being released in the movement to the driving gears and hands, pinions, and all that good stuff. There's a lot of technical terms that are used in there that we're not going to go into right now.
What about the Johnson rods?
They're. If you have to replace those, you got to go to AutoZone. They're right next to the blinker fluid. So, with mechanical movements, probably the most common repair with those and the most common reason for those to stop is, one, they're either not wound enough. A lot of the older ones are going to be a hand wind, so you actually have to wind them every morning. And they usually have enough power to run throughout the day. Then you have automatics, which are still a mechanical movement, but instead of always having to hand wind that watch, they actually have an oscillating weight in there that as you move, it keeps the watch wound, and then you don't have to worry about it. But if you don't move enough, even though you may think that you move a lot, there's a lot of people out there that just don't move quite enough to keep the watch at full power. And so that is probably the most common problem with mechanical watches. Now, when it comes to an actual mechanical problem within the movement, probably the most common one is broken mainspring. And so the mainspring is essentially your power for the whole movement. It's a coiled spring that is actually under this little winding wheel here. And what it is it's basically a coiled spring that holds basically kinetic energy. Mm-hmm. And so as that gets wound up in there, you're putting more and more tightness on that spring, and you're allowing more energy to be stored in that spring. So the problem gets to be, especially with older movements that didn't have kind of a check in there to stop, overwinding is you would overwind the watch and you'd break that spring. And so then it would only run for maybe a few seconds or a few minutes, at most a few hours, and then it's stopping again. And so that's something that has to get replaced. And any time that we service a mechanical movement, that's probably the most common part that gets replaced.
If we do Rolex service, that mainspring will be
Replaced every time.
Yeah.
So with mechanical movements, as far as upkeeping those, they do need serviced every 3 to 5 years, regardless of who made it. I know that there's some out there that say, oh, well, you know, you get it's sold to you as, well, you never have to worry about it because it's a mechanical movement. You never have to change battery or do anything to it. Well, yes, you never have to change battery because it doesn't have one, but it does need serviced because essentially it's like a small engine. It does have oil in it, not in the same sense that your engine does. It's just got little points of oil and lubricants that they need to be serviced, and with those oils breaking down and stuff, it causes the watch to have to work a little bit harder to keep running, and then you start getting wear on parts. So they do need serviced on those mechanical movements, whether they're automatic or hand wind or whatever, they still need serviced. But probably the most common movement used today is a quartz movement.
Right. And there's some variations even in the quartz movement.
Yeah.
So that's the one we probably have the most trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
Is somebody gets in that watch that shouldn't be in there. And there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers that think, wow, this is not a big deal. I'll just
change that battery.
Yeah. So, and the first thing that kind of comes to mind, and I know this isn't the first thing that Colton was going to think about, but there are a couple ways to get the back off of a watch, and one of them is what we call a snapback case.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's normally like smooth on the back for the most part. There's not any little indentations where you put this little case back wrench on.
Yeah.
And so you take a little tool, we've got case back tools or whatever.
Yeah.
And basically pop that back off. Now there are some cases that have the little indentations
to make you think that it's a screw back.
But it's still a snapback.
Yeah.
So I've got a customer, so how much you...
Okay. So the problem gets to be with those is you've got people that are trying to unscrew them and they don't unscrew. And so they're actually ones that need to pop off, and so we end up with lots of problems there. The other thing is there's some that are a screw back that people try and pry off whenever you actually need a special wrench and tool to actually get the back off. Now, the reason we say this is because we know that there's a lot of people out there that no matter what we say are going to try and do it at home. And while that can be done, there are a lot of sensitive parts, including that case back, because if the case back on either the snapback or the screw back gets even slightly dented or warped, it's not going to go back on right. You're not going to get a seal on it, and there's a good chance you're going to get moisture in it if you even get the back on. So once you do have the back off, there are a lot of sensitive parts in there. With quartz watches, probably the most sensitive part is this little copper guy right here, which is called a coil. So this is actually really, really fine wound copper wire. It's about the thickness of like blonde hair. It's really, really thin. This part right here, if you just touch it just right, you pretty much destroy the movement. It almost always has to be replaced. And that is probably the most common incident we see happen with quartz movements, and why they need to be replaced, or why someone has an issue whenever they're changing their battery, is they either nick or break or cut the coil, and then it's just done. And the movement has to be replaced, which can be done, but typically that process ends up being more than what the watch is worth. So got to really be careful with that. Best idea is just to take it to somebody like us that we are trained to do this, and we do this on a regular basis. Every single day we change watch batteries, and so we know how to be careful with them, what parts to avoid and what not to touch, and how to get those back in there very carefully. It's not as simple as what most people would assume to change a watch battery. So with these movements all have different parts and pieces to them. Everybody makes their movements differently. All of them have a different way of holding a battery. Some it's like this, where it's simply just pushing the battery in, and it's got a little spring on the inside here that holds the battery in place. Others, it has what's called a battery strap or a battery keeper that actually goes over the top and has screws on either end, which are a whole nother fun little ordeal because they're spring loaded. And so the moment that you loosen up the screw just right, then the little battery strap goes flying, and then you have to spend a half hour trying to find the thing if you don't know how to hold it just right. And so there's a lot of little parts in there that can go missing and cause a problem. The other issue is people waiting too long to get a battery changed, and so whenever they bring it in and the battery has started to leak after it's been dead for so long, we start getting corrosion and acid in the movement, in which case we have to replace the movement there too. The other thing is brought up corrosion. This is a huge issue, especially with those that are trying to change them at home, or people that are changing them for you that just don't quite know exactly what all needs to be done, and which case usually the big culprit is oil from your fingers and fingerprints left inside the watch. So those oils and stuff off of your finger can cause corrosion and breakdown within the watch movement, and it's just not pretty. It causes the movement to have to work a lot harder to kind of power through the grime. If you get any little bit of dust and stuff in there, it can cause issues as well. So best thing to do is just bring it to somebody that knows exactly what they're doing and has a lot of experience with a bunch of different movements, because like I said, these quartz watches, all of them are different. Even within the same company, the movements are all different. One of them in particular that we see a lot of different movements in is Fossil, with all the different functions and stuff that they offer in a lot of their watches. These watches can have up to, we've seen as many as 4 batteries in one watch, and they're all in different places. And so it's something with that definitely need to have somebody know what they're doing in order to get in them, because we've actually seen them where they've stacked movements. So there'll be one movement here, so you have like the face of the watch here, we've got it upside down, and we've got one movement here, and then we have another movement on top of this to do a whole different function. And so you have to remove one of those to access the other one. And so we've had a lot of people come in with those types of instances where there's a dual movement, and they replace the battery in the first one and can't seem to get the watch to run right. Like, part of it functions, but not all of it functions, and they're like, okay, well, what's wrong? Well, there's actually a hidden movement underneath there. And so it's just a lot of little stuff that if you don't know what to look for and you don't know how to handle it, it's best to just take it to somebody that does. That way we can get it changed for you and you can get on your way without any incident, and we can assure that, you know, the next time that battery gets replaced, that there's not going to be a bunch of dirt and grime and fingerprints and corrosion and everything else in there, because these batteries are going to typically last 1 to 2 years. And so if you leave a fingerprint in there and it's got 2 years to kind of set and do some damage on your watch, the next time you go in to get the battery replaced, may have to replace the movement as well. So it's just best to get it serviced by somebody that is either authorized or has got a lot of experience doing this. As far as care for quartz watches, main thing is, once the batteries die in those, be sure to get them changed as quickly as possible. The longer a battery that is dead sets inside of a watch, the more susceptible it is to corrosion and leaking. And then you get acid in the movement, like I said before, and it can cause a number of different problems, with the worst case being that many of the parts, if not all of the parts inside the watch, have to be replaced. It can damage seals, it can damage the dial, it can damage hands, it can damage pretty much anything and everything inside that watch, because that acid can get kind of nasty. So there are a bunch of other movements out there that we haven't covered. Most of those are going to be fairly rare. Like we said, the most common ones are going to be quartz and mechanical. There are some kinetic movements out there. There are solar movements out there. Probably the more common solar movements you're going to see are like the Citizen Eco Drives that don't need a battery. So with those, the main thing for care on those is just making sure that they see enough light to stay charged. And if it gets to the point where they're not holding a charge, then they do need to be sent in to get serviced by the company that manufactured them. Because those are permanent cells that are in there. And so we have a lot of issues with people having Eco Drive watches or similar ones, and they take them to go get a battery changed because the watch isn't running, but it's a permanent battery, and they go and rip it out when the battery's actually welded in, and then you destroy the movement and the whole thing has to be replaced. So lots of fun stuff. They are actually a lot of fun to work on whenever got some experience with them, but if you don't, and it's something that you're just needing a battery replaced, the less expensive and quicker route is to actually have somebody else do it for you that knows what they're doing. Typically with quartz watches, it only takes us a couple of minutes to get them changed and get you on your way, and without a lot of headaches. So just be sure to bring them in and get them checked. If you have a mechanical movement, those do need serviced every 3 to 5 years, and we recommend having those done by somebody that is a certified watchmaker and is authorized to work on the movement or the style and model of your watch that you have, because a lot of those need original parts for them whenever they are being worked on, and not aftermarket parts that are susceptible to being lower quality and usually end up costing you more in the long run because you're going to need maintenance more frequently. So anyway, that was a long-winded explanation about watch movements, basically just simple care of them. There's a lot more that goes into these, especially in the mechanical side. There are so many functions out there and different complications that you can get in a mechanical movement, and they are so intricate and have so many parts that we could talk about and discuss that can't really do it in a single episode here. So if you guys have any questions for us about any of these types of movements or care for them, please give us a call at 361-991-7565, or you can always visit us here at our store at Suzanne's Custom Jewelers. We are located at 4226 South Alameda in the Town & Country Shopping Center right here in Corpus Christi, Texas. You can visit us online at suzannes-jewelers.com or right here on Facebook. Be sure to check out our Instagram, and if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with some of your friends, and go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button so you can get notifications when we post new videos and new episodes. Also, you can check out past episodes about pretty much anything jewelry related and learn a little bit more about maybe your favorite gemstone or style of jewelry or cutting or whatever the case may be. And don't forget to click the little bell as well, and that will give you the alerts. So we thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week here on Family Jewels. Bye.